In response to the Minister's keynote, we have our next panel, which is Navigating the Path to Productivity, Industrial and Commercial Development. And it's my treat to call our panellists to stage. Erin Flaherty, Chair, National Intermodal. Simon Hickey, CEO, Western Sydney International Airport. Ian Whitfield, Executive General Manager, Westlink M7. Peter Whitlam, Executive Director, Western Sydney Project Office, Transport for New South Wales, and the Dialogue's very own provocateur, Luke Turner, Executive Director, Policy and Advocacy. Please make them welcome. Simon. Just giving me more glory on the stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Faith. I'm Luke Turner. I'm the Executive Director of Policy and Advocacy from the Dialogue. Today we are navigating the path to productivity. What do we mean by that? Well, we really want to talk about the opportunity that exists in Western Sydney, particularly that area west of the M7, to generate jobs, to generate long-term economic activity and productivity. Transport obviously plays a big role in that, but there are a lot of discussions underway around what is going to occur around the airport, around the Aerotropolis, and how we need to be planning for that right now. So before we get into all of that, obviously the federal government decision yesterday is what everyone's talking about. I wanted to start with you, Ian. You're out there not only building the M7, M12 interchange, but widening the M7 corridor. Just what does it practically mean for you now when the project's already underway, a decision like this, noting what the Minister has said, that the discussion's not over?
Yeah, I think certainly surprise yesterday was the feeling we had. I think realistically, though, for us, we've got a job to do. We're here, we're committed to Western Sydney. We want to build to enable that growth. And we have confidence that the government will sort out this issue. So for us, there's no change. We just keep going to program, no issue, heads down. And I think, if you think back to 2003 when Westlink M7 was built, and you think of what was west of Sydney before then and what it is today, our job really is, we see our role, we bought into the vision of government. It's all about bringing that growth to Western Sydney. We're committed to that. We look at what's happened. It's amazing, the growth that's happened. I think we feel we've probably bared a lot of the burden of enabling and facilitating that growth, and it was really great to hear from Minister Halen today that rapid buses are starting to see more public transport come to Western Sydney. I think the growth is amazing. It can't be done through one mode of transport. It's got to be done by loads. So it was really good to hear Minister Halen mention that today.
Great. And I might jump to you, Peter. Just wanted to get some thoughts on you on the role of transport in supporting current and future development in and around that part of the city, and how obviously the Minister's just announced a 30-year vision, which is some kind of a soft planning, I suppose, as you might put it. What's happening today, and I guess some thoughts on the role that transport plays in unlocking what we want to see in that area of Sydney?
So obviously transport's got a very important part to play. I'm very pleased the Minister's just spoke and he's done most of my work, which is great news. We've been in Western Sydney, I guess the airport was a catalyst for a lot of things to happen back in 2014, and straight after that the Western Sydney Infrastructure Plan was announced, which was for $3.6 billion back then of enabling roads, the Northern Road, Boonjelly Road, a bunch of others, and the final piece in that is the M12. So in that respect, transport has led development parts in it. In other places we support. With the M5 westbound was mentioned this morning, it's going to solve a whole bunch of safety and congestion issues, but it's also very strongly pointed at productivity with the intermodal in development there. And clearly it is a role where transport helps to leverage other investments to make sure that they're getting the best value they can, and we're putting it in terms of, we're just helping out the economy to realise those investments. A lot of what we're doing at the moment is putting in place things for essentially day one operations of the airport. So a lot of the bigger build has been committed, and there's other things down the track through that vision. But things like the $200 million worth of safety improvements in Elizabeth Drive will make the current transport load move more safely and more efficiently. I think that transport has a number of roles to play. In the West, we have been very much a roads-based place. Unless you lived on the railway line, you used a car to get around. And as has been pointed out, there's a very strong movement towards going much more intermodal now. And part of the roads part is to make sure that metro stations and other places are enabled in terms of people getting in there to be able to move into not just the transport interchange, but to move effectively around places built for people.
Yeah, right. So you mentioned road safety. I guess the less sexy part of this conversation, we're talking about industrial land uses. It basically means lots and lots of trucks, creates safety issues, creates a lot of wear and tear on the road network. So anything you might add on just the work that goes on inside transport, future planning for maintenance, and just making communities and future communities ready for that volume of heavy vehicles?
So I guess the Western Sydney Infrastructure Plan in the first place was very much aimed at the idea that the task in Western Sydney was going to change a lot. There's lots and lots of different industry in place, and all of the roads of Western Sydney Infrastructure Plan are built to move that load effectively. You know, there was always a debate between should the east-west connection be Elizabeth Drive or a new motorway, and clearly the enablement of the M12 as a direct access to the M7 and to other motorways, the M7, the M4, the Northern Road, is all about providing effective, safe corridors for transport to move rapidly. I can't really talk about the maintenance, you're way outside my expertise area there. But you know, any effective precinct is enabled by roads and other transport functions with very different goals in mind. Some are about moving people around places, some are involved in connecting to main arteries and so on. So I think the transport will continue to look at what are the pressing needs in a world of infinite demand and finite resources. We'll continue to make the choices and the balances through good planning, consultation, with understanding what's happening around the wider precincts, to understand what is the most important, what's the greatest value investments that we make.
Yeah, thanks. I will get to you, Erin and Simon, but just one of the Slido questions I wanted to tick off while we're on the building of roads relates to, I guess, future-proofing our current infrastructure builds to be resilient to climate change effectively, natural disasters, and more and more frequent inclement weather. Anything you can, comment on with the work that's going on now to future-proof our roads?
Yes, so there's particularly around the Hawkesbury Nepean, there's a lot of consideration of how do we provide places that are effective, and then also that provide safety and resilience around flooding in particular. The new Richmond Bridge is a project in planning, a $500 million commitment to put in place a new Nepean crossing. That has in mind very much North Richmond. How does it connect? How do people move across that river, provide another crossing, and therefore enable better journeys from a lot of perspectives. But it's also taking very much into account how does the river live and work and respond to events, and so it provides a much more resilient route to increase that amenity for people there. The Hawkesbury Nepean Valley has been looked at in terms of flood routes as well. That's in the planning stage and so on. So we're always looking to see how do we use changes in technology, better knowledge, the better planning aspects to make sure that we are building in improvements all the time to how the transport links work within our environment.
Right. So we've gone a bit off topic, but back to the productivity discussion. Erin, what's going on at Moorebank gives us a bit of a clue to what we might see in 10, 20 years around Western Sydney Airport. Do you want to just give us a bit of an overview of, I guess, what we're seeing at the moment at Moorebank and what we can expect once the intermodal terminal really kicks into gear?
Thank you. It's a shame that we were told we couldn't have any slides at this event because I have the most fabulous slide of Moorebank. And it's hidden behind a big screen at the moment. But just a little history. Moorebank was originally the vision of the current Prime Minister, Prime Minister Albanese. And it's fair to say that it was a bit of an experiment, I would say. It just happened to be a very sweet spot where we had the M5 adjacent to the main Western Sydney freight line, a direct line into Port Botany. So from a logistics and freight perspective, it was just a perfect spot. Fair to say, though, that 10 years ago, 5 years ago, there probably was a view that the Commonwealth would partner with Cube, the original partners, and probably look to divest itself to get out. But what's happened over the last couple of years is we've had COVID, we've had geopolitical issues, we've had supply chain issues, and all of a sudden the intermodal model, if you like, I think is now seen as really the only way to start to handle freight. You know, we need to have more rail, more freight on rail. What National Modal does, or Moorebank, it's an inland port, if I can put it like that. So the ports are getting constrained. Any sort of commercial land or industrial land in the city is also becoming constrained. So what Moorebank offers is a sort of one-stop shop, if you like. So it's for freight, containerised freight. It's not passenger. We have a new IMEX terminal, which is up and running, which can handle 500,000 containers a year. We're just completing an interstate terminal, which will be able to handle 1 million containers a year. And what we will be providing then is that last point, if you like, of what we call in the industry de-stuffing. So the containers will arrive at Moorebank, and the new warehouses there are all robotic. Woolworths have both their major regional distribution and their national distribution centres there, and these are just the largest warehouses that you've ever seen, which is why I said it's a shame I haven't got a photograph, but they're all robotic. The technology is amazing, which is actually another whole interesting topic because freight is really moving into IT. You know, freight is not just about people driving trucks and you know, the sort of heavy diesel type history that I think it used to have. It really is very, very sophisticated. And the Woolworths supply chain and facilities that they're building out at Moorebank are just amazing. So, you know, that's a whole nother area, and all the employment that would go with that. But so it's an amazing precinct, really, and we should be up and running, finally completed in June next year. Right,
and a follow-up question for me. We're talking about job creation, and you spoke to the impact of technology on logistics. Are we essentially talking about a lower number of higher value jobs in that sector than 10, 20 years ago?
Well, there'll be a higher number of high value jobs. What we're doing at Moorebank is we're building it into a precinct, if you like. So we're thinking about a really diverse workforce. We've got childcare facilities built in where I know Logos, who are our partners, are in discussion with the City of Liverpool and also I think with Western Sydney University to think about building up a sort of freight capability within the precinct. So there's lots of jobs and educational opportunities that come with projects of this size.
Right. I'm going to jump to you, Simon. Looking forward to 3 years from now and beyond, what role you see Western Sydney Airport, Western Sydney International as you're now going by, in stimulating, feeding into everything, all the land uses that are going to be happening around the airport?
Well, so WSI is really a catalyst for everything, all of the economic activity that's emerging around us. And when you look at what is coming, it's we've got now 10 hotels that I'm aware of in the region that are either in development or just come out or are in planning. That's versus pretty limited. I think I can think of one prior to that. So we're starting to grow that sector. We're starting to see, well, Kemps Creek, obviously, and we talked about Moorebank, which is amazing. You've got Amazon's facility up in Kemps Creek, again, using robotics, advanced robotics. From their top floor, they look down at our runway and they say, giddy up, because they're about 30% full at the moment, and they're going to continue to grow, and that's going to become their major distribution centre. You've got the largest sortation centre for Australia Post right next door. So all of this development is growing in and around Western Sydney Airport. And we help to facilitate that by having a 24/7 airport, the first that we've had in Sydney, our largest economic city in Australia. That's going to generate an increase. It's going to stimulate, like we probably have never seen before, but a stimulation for economic growth, which just means jobs and opportunities actually at the end of the day in all sorts of sectors. Freight will come in overnight, go through the sortation centres and be distributed out in the morning. We'll be able to get fresh produce from all the lands that surround us and up into Asia overnight, so it's on their breakfast tables in the morning. We are able to have these visions because the airport exists. We've got an airport that within a few years will be the size of Adelaide Airport, and the stimulatory impact of that, the ability to bring people from all over Asia to and from Australia overnight very quickly. But also we've got 170 different ancestries just here in Western Sydney, 170 different ancestries. So think about that. That means that someone from everywhere in the world has moved to Western Sydney Airport and now calls Western Sydney, Western Sydney Airport, moved to Western Sydney and now calls Western Sydney home. Now, you know, if you looked at visitation at the moment, 28% of visitation for New South Wales is driven by visiting family and relatives. For Western Sydney Airport, that's going to be even higher because you're going to easily be able to get your family to come and visit, or you're going to be able to do that. So I think that we're part of that mix. I think if you're looking at what drives investment in economic outcomes and productivity, it's connectivity, and that's being provided by the airport across Australia and internationally. And we talked about road and rail and metro and buses today. Connectivity is essential. But it's more than just connectivity, it's diversity. We have, as I said, the diversity of that 170 different ancestries is actually an advantage. That's a strategic advantage. It provides entrepreneurship that we have, you know, that is absolutely unbelievable. So we're the third largest economy in Australia. We have the largest number of SMEs. That means there's massive entrepreneurship here, and we're going to continue to foster that and grow that. If you bring one of the things that brings diversity into the workplace is the closeness of the job to where you live. That's actually the main driver of diversity in the workplace. And so we need to continue that and bring great jobs closer to where people live. It's no good to say, hey, you should go to work. It's only an hour and a half over here. No problem at all. That's a big problem, right? So bringing great jobs closer to home is a big thing. And the final thing I would say is innovation. And so what's going to happen in the Aerotropolis is that we're bringing innovation. We've got the multiversity that's there. We've got the Advanced Manufacturing Research Facility. We've got Agribusiness Precinct. We've got space research. So all of those unbelievable jobs are being created because the airport is there next door to the 24/7 airport. These are new jobs. These jobs are going to, they're generating new outcomes for people, new opportunities for people. And so the airport is helping to facilitate the growth in those areas that are great innovations for Western Sydney and for Sydney. And
while we're with you, Simon, obviously in the aviation sector, business travel is a big driver of the decision-making of airlines and planning of airports. high-value jobs close to the airport's obviously factoring into a lot of your thinking. Ideally, you'd like the government to be up there landing some really high-value corporate tenants nearby to drive that business travel sector. Chris is about to get up and speak to some of the priorities we see in government being able to go out and land some of those deals. Just anything you could add in terms of what you are expecting or the ideal scenario in terms of business passenger demand into the airport?
So if you look at right now what we've announced Qantas is going to base 15 aircraft for domestic only. That will be Qantas and Jetstar, a mix, but it's 30% Qantas, and so there's a large component that's also business traffic there as well as the low-cost traffic. So there's that mix, there's anticipation of that mix. Our success is also the success of the Aerotropolis and the surrounding areas. And so we're very much working together to grow new industry, to bring industry, as I talked about. And so I think that, you know, we're actually symbiotic in terms of what we're looking to grow. And we've got a 200-hectare business park ourselves on the airport, and we'll be looking to grow industry, and we've got announcements that we'll be making around that, you know, coming up as well. So there will be growth all around us. That will grow the business community, but it's about growing opportunities, right? Jobs and opportunities for people that really don't exist in the way and the magnitude of which they will come. And they are across, whether it be tourism, you know, the nighttime economy, whether it be industry, whether it be technology. Just at an airport itself, an airport is also changing. So, you know, there's a lot of jobs in moving, ground handling, moving bags around and all of that. But actually there's jobs now in cybersecurity, technology. The jobs are actually changing, and the workforce is also changing in terms of how that's coming together now.
Right. And in terms of that future economic activity, job growth, Simon mentioned the agribusiness out on the other side of the airport. Ian, how does all of this kind of factor into your forward planning or your thinking on when, you know, future corridors might be up for development, like the outer orbital?
Yeah, I suppose the first thing I'd say first is let's try and utilise the assets we've already got. And I think with the airport coming 24/7, I think there's a change we can make in heavy commercial vehicle movements. If you look at the moment, most vehicle movements happen between 5 in the morning and 7 at night. How do we get that more to an evening travel? Increase productivity by stopping these vehicles from sitting in gridlock congestion and hopefully free up the roads for other users as well. I know London, with the Olympics, that was their catalyst to make the change. So hopefully with the airport coming here, we can maybe start to bring together businesses, councils, hauliers, state government to try and drive this change for us as well. So that would be the first thing for me, to try and let's utilize the assets we've got better. I think the outer orbital is probably the next big game changer, I would see. When Westlink M7 was built, it then enabled things to move further west. Outer orbital would then start to help facilitate that growth further. From my perspective, and these are all government policies and government decisions, but private equity can certainly help bring things forward. There's tremendous growth here. You hear what's happening at Moobank, what's happening with the airport. This is formidable growth that's coming. I recognise the toll burden that everybody's got. There's different ways of looking at tolling and looking at how things can be paid for. It doesn't always have to be the burden of the individuals. So I think it's trying to think outside the box, and how can we use private equity to try and bring forward the assets to make sure we realise this growth as soon as possible.
So I guess it's the rate of growth, the level of activity that happens in that part of the city kind of dictates corridor planning. Erin, there's also plans for a future intermodal terminal in, I think, Kemps Creek, Mamre Road kind of area, and a new freight line connecting from the southern line through to the Western Sydney employment lands. Any insights you can provide on when we should be making some serious moves to secure that corridors and facilities?
Well, with my experience from Infrastructure New South Wales and also Inland Rail, the earlier you can secure a corridor, the better. Honestly, that's the first thing that we need to do in infrastructure planning is get those corridors. So, you know, my easy answer for that is now, like right this minute. In fact, go outside and pick up the phone and start doing it. I mean, it really is the most fundamentally important part of infrastructure planning. But the other comment I'd just like to make in relation to the discussions we've been having is that I think everybody's very conscious too that we just can't have growth without an understanding of the consequences. So what Simon's talking about in Western Sydney with the airport ticks a whole lot of boxes. What we're doing with the road ticks a whole lot of boxes. But I think it would be remiss of me if I was not to say that the whole decarbonisation landscape that we're moving into is something that rail and intermodals really is picking up into. You know, we can take 300,000 trucks off a year for every 500,000 containers that are moved. So I think that it's a three-legged stool, I think, as the Minister said, or maybe it was Chris said. But, you know, we've got air transport, we've got the freight that you'll be using, we've got the roads, but then also we have to start focusing on moving our heavy, big bulk commodities by rail. And that is just the way of the future. I mean, we can't continue down a path where transport has got something like 18% of emissions. Rail only produces 4%. So I think there's a real game changer now, and we have to sort of integrate rail into all of our planning, and we have to integrate intermodals into that planning as well. So, you know, for Western Sydney residents don't want to have the number of trucks, you know, big, heavy trucks coming into the communities because the growth is there. There will be another 2 million people, you know, in this neighbourhood really quickly. So the more that we can get those big, heavy haulage trucks off the road, and we get them into intermodals where you've got associated warehousing, and then you get a smaller truck to deliver that last mile. So I think that's really what we need to be thinking, sort of integrated strategy.
It feels like we've been having this discussion for a really long time around the road, rail kind of mode share for the freight task. Is there, just quick, I'm noting time, is it simply an infrastructure solution? Is there a policy lever we need to pull, a price signal to accelerate that?
I think there's definitely a policy lever, but they're not really in competition with each other. I mean, I think the rail has lagged. When I first started in this role, and I was doing some research, and someone said to me that the amount of freight that moves between Melbourne and Sydney by rail is only 2%. I was really shocked. I mean, 2% is nothing. So what rail needs to do is rail needs to actually make the case for why it is more effective, why it's more efficient, why it's more reliable. So that's what part of this job with an intermodal is, to actually convince our suppliers that, you know, they can bring goods to these intermodals and they will be very quickly dispersed into the wider network. So I think everybody has to work together. I mean, transport and the trucking industry have major issues with the age of their drivers. It's really difficult to get drivers. So a lot of that heavy haulage that's been going up and down the Hume Highway, you know, probably should be on. So, but to change those levers, it's, as I said, it's not only just a matter of rail actually picking up its game, but I think we are getting to the point where we might need some policy from the Commonwealth and the states.
Right. We're almost out of time, but one quick question to each of you before we finish. Chris is about to get up to share his thoughts, our thoughts on how we can make the Aerotropolis a success in terms of getting some big global capital invested there. I'm going to ask you to jump out of your lane a little bit, each of you, starting with you, maybe Simon. If you had a compelling proposition for any global firm to invest in the Aerotropolis that's going to have the maximum impact in terms of jobs and future industry development, who would it be?
The Aerotropolis has signed, I think, a number of MOUs, and I'd like to see every one of them come. So I think that that would be my goal. I don't think one alone. I'd like to see every one of those MOUs translated to those companies moving their Australasia and potentially Asia-Pac business to Western Sydney.
Erin, any fast thoughts on who you could sign up anyone to invest in that part of Sydney?
In Moorebank or in Western Sydney?
In the Aerotropolis.
Oh, in the
next to the
Aerotropolis.
airport. Yeah.
They're the competition. Having
So
just said
sabotage them. Who would you not sign up?
I think I was out there. Simon very kindly hosted us a little while ago through the Australian-British Infrastructure Catalyst, and my sense is I see what Amazon are doing. You know, it's those sort of very large tenants who are dealing with internet-based products. I mean, that to me is a very sweet spot for the airport.
Peter?
I'd sign up everybody, to be honest.
Everybody?
But the best way to make the case is for a lot of voices to be heard, to be working in collaboration and not competing, so that people are trying to make really, really good investments that kind of set themselves apart. In terms of transport, it's long gone since we built roads for road's sake. We're not trying to win a battle here. We're trying to contribute to a very vibrant area, to use the word that was used before. Western Sydney needs us to keep collaborating. If I look around the space I'm working in right now, the airport, the M7, so WSA Co, Western Sydney Parklands, Metro, Sydney Water, Gemini have all gotten together and made some really, really good decisions collaboratively and managed to leverage rather than compete. That is the kind of dialogue I think that results in better outcomes for the whole of the community.
Okay, last one, Ian. Be quick. You're pick one winner. Who are you backing?
I'd go for anything that's high-end manufacturing would be really good. Let's try and create those high-end jobs in Western Sydney, and let's get Western Sydney back to manufacturing as well.
Yeah, good call. All right, well, thanks, everyone. Thanks, panellists. Give them a round of applause.